Welcome to Cinephile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinephilepod.com. Boutique to Preserve and Collect chronicles the remarkable resurgence of collectible Blu-ray culture and the specialty labels around the world dedicated to preserving, restoring, and reintroducing long-lost obscurities and cinematic landmarks to a new generation of audiences. The film features filmmakers, performers, label representatives, historians, collectors, and devoted fans. Again, the film is called Boutique to Preserve and Collect. We're joined today by the director, Ry Levey. Ry, welcome to Cinephile.
Thanks so much. I'm glad to be here, Mike.
I wanted to first let our audience know that you and I have worked together for many years. You are also a publicist. You have your own PR company, and you have been bringing me films over the years. And thank you for being a part of Film School Radio and now Cinephile. I really appreciate it. I always have. So thank you.
Quite welcome. I've always enjoyed having our filmmakers, and I myself have also been on your previous program before as well when I was in production on my last film.
That was the wrestling film.
Out in the ring, yes. You were generous enough to give us the time when we were raising funds at that point, and then ultimately that film went on to a level of some acclaim. So I'm kind of proud of that work. So thank you so much.
Well, good on you. And when I'm watching the film, I can't help but project my own life in terms of my love of films, and many films would be considered off the beaten path of for a lot of cinemaphiles. As I've told you before, I worked in a video shop, so all of this brought back a lot of really great memories for me. But for people who weren't of that age and weren't around, let's talk a little bit about sort of the inspiration for the story and a little bit of the, I'll call it the milieu of the collectors, the fans, the devotees, and that history, which is what this film is a lot about.
So yeah, I mean I come about this in a similar way to you, having worked in a video store. My mother was a video sales rep in the 1980s. So her job was, of course, to sell the films to the video stores. And part of what happens when you do that is you're provided screening copies of VHS tapes. For me, it was, I was able to kind of consume all of this video ephemera and different stuff. Some video, the higher profile films would come home and you'd know what they were. You would get a copy of Lethal Weapon or Back to the Future, and you'd see the box on it. But many of these films would come in a very generic white box with just a label. And that led to me just kind of opening up films and discovering strange movies and different films. And it was that kind of discovery component that led to me eventually becoming a tape trader in the 90s. I worked in video stores, and it kind of fueled the fire in my love of cinema, but also my interest in cinematic obscurities, classic cinema, and of great note, genre cinema specifically. So many great horror films, and so many not so great horror films and genre films that were just equally as much fun, just because of their absurdity or their hyper violence or their campness, and so my other love of cinema comes from a completely different background. My stepfather was photographer for adult film actresses and exotic dancers, strippers, and was also a pornographer. So he had his own collection of cinema. So whether, obviously, kids should not be watching adult film, but it was there. It was part of my life. And then I consumed every type of, cinema, from cult to art house to adult cinema.
And I do want to explore that connection between porn and, as you were, and sort of the fringes of the filmmaking world that you explore in this film, as well as the impact that porn had on the technology of bringing these films to a wider audience. It is a fascinating part of telling this story, but your own history in terms of fringe films, films out of the mainstream.
Yeah, I guess you call it, in some cases, much of this work was considered outsider art art from the mainstream.
Okay.
Um, we've always kind of pushed, there's always been this space that's kind of always pushed experimental cinema and genre film and adult cinema and cult film to the outside.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, if you weren't a film that was a studio-based film that had grossed millions of dollars and had, major Hollywood acclaim or at least commercial viability, you were relegated to kind of two spaces in this, specifically in the home entertainment market in VHS, before that beta, in places as well. You had video stores that needed to stock their shelves. So VHS companies would acquire the rights to straight to video titles or independent films or older drive-in classics. They would find whatever VHS format or rough-hewn format that they could, and they would produce them in whatever way they could for a rather inexpensive way and be able to still sell those tapes at kind of a premium, because in the 80s and even to the up until the early to mid 90s, VHS tapes were not inexpensive. I mean, a video
Mm.
store paid anywhere between 59 to 129.99 for a title. It was called price for rental. And then you had the occasional title that would be your Disney film or a major box office hit that would be priced for what they called sell through. That was a similar market in the adult market, which stayed very high priced. So if you ran a video store, you were paying a premium and you would rent these titles out for that pricing. At some point, those tapes would be you would sell them off as previously viewed. And then there were companies that would buy the rights to a large amount or maybe a catalog of lower budget genre film, sex films, maybe dramas, and they would put those out on a lower quality version of VHS, and those would then become filler for a lot of the shelves. And it's kind of in that space that you find a lot of films that were overlooked, marginalized, or left to possibly, didn't have the value or the art or considered to have the artistic value of your non-studio films. And with sex film as well, that a lot of that was something that found its real success component on VHS, because even though you had films like Deep Throat and Behind the Green Door playing at theaters, when it became kind of de rigueur to go with your wife to go see the new adult film, by about 80, 81, it was relegated back to the privacy of your own home. And that's where VHS really, those who didn't want to be seen as going to, 42nd Street or to one of maybe the crossover films, that were sex films, it was back to a relegation of where, you could find these at home. As we kind of transitioned out of VHS into DVD, much more of this duplication, the technology was becoming very expensive. So it didn't make sense at that point to really revisit a lot of this work. And so much of it started to get relegated to the dustbins of history. And it's this movement that has happened in the last, I'd say, 10 years primarily, even though it has made its appearances throughout the past 30 to 40 years, that has brought so much of this work back for a new critical reappraisal, but an audience reappraisal.
Thank you. That's a great answer. I do remember Hollywood flirting with the idea of an X-rated film mainstream. I think of Midnight Cowboy. But also there was one called, I think, Seconds, which was a Richard Dreyfuss film where it got an X rating as well because it was about, I think it was about a man who made pornography, as I
Mhm.
recall, or a Hollywood director who had fallen on hard times and was making sex films. So there was a flirtation with that idea. Devil and Miss Jones, it was another one of those that was considered mainstream porn that people were going out to see. So there has been this kind of dialogue back and forth between legitimate filmmaking and the fringe, I'll call it the fringe of filmmaking, which it may not be the right word. So independent, you mentioned independent filmmaking as well. What was the first film that you remember seeing that just kind of just swept you up into something you felt like this is the world I belong in?
I kind of think of, there's kind of like these different spaces of time where film impact me. I remember my uncle having a VHS machine and him letting me watch things that he probably shouldn't have. I remember watching at his house, he had two tapes. He had Cheech and Chong's Up in Smoke and Cameron Mitchell and the Toolbox Murders, the original Toolbox Murders. And I think I was like 5, which is so not appropriate for anybody under any age. Like, but, it was there. Because, obviously, grandparents give their kids too much sugar. Uncles will let their nephews get away with things, don't tell your mom. And then as my mother realized, I kind of started to develop this the love of kind of films that were a little different. I wanted to see, I always felt like I kind of wanted to be not watching the same movies as every other kid. I read Stephen King books when I was 6 or 7. I was an advanced reader. So I was instantly drawn to that and I wanted to see. Now I knew there was a movie version of Cujo and I knew there was a movie version of Christine. And I think my mother realized that as video stores were doing that, video stores were supposed to not rent to kids, but they would rent to kids and they didn't care that I was going to see these movies somehow. And so there became a point in time where they would police a little bit of what I was watching. And so I'd get to watch things like Bloody Birthday. Again, not an appropriate film for kids, but I guess in the case of my family, I thought, well, at least we can try to curb some of the access. Curbing that access actually kind of backfired in a way because it just made me want to find stuff that was much more transgressive and edgy. And when your father has adult cinema in the house, you're searching through he had a Pine Hutch table, and I remember he had Friday the 13th part 1, 2, 3, and then right alongside that tape, he'd had a copy of like Debbie Does Dallas. And so they would be out all day. He was in bands and she'd be at work and you'd sneak into the table and then you'd get extra brilliant as you became more obsessed with these movies, knowing you had to rewind it back to the same spot where that movie would play. You'd slip it back in. You'd do all these sneaky things to just see whatever you could. And so there was all of this stuff that kind of really, really kind of open. If you told me not, I wasn't allowed to watch it, I probably went out of my way to try to watch it. And it was that kind of love that kind of opened me up to like different things that when I met this, I remember this guy. I was 14 years old. He was the coolest guy. He was in a rock band and he had long hair and he worked the overnight shift at the video store Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And I'd just go hang out on the 11 till 7 a.m. and stay overnight. And we'd watch VHS tapes and like the children's carousel because they had their own little videotape there. So we go watch adult movies and people would walk in and we'd put other weird movies on the TV. And he got me not only into more cult films, like just stuff, because we would just discover things and these thousands of weird tapes because so many stores would just buy 25,000 bulk tapes. And you didn't know what was on the shelf because there was all these companies just putting out whatever they could get. And then I remember him handing me a copy of Alejandro Jodorowsky's Santa Sangre. And I was already kind of into horror films, but Santa Sangre was my kind of my and Suspiria by Dario Argento were my gateway genre films into art house. And then it became documentaries like Visions of Light, And then we had a theater. Then I wanted to see again weird movies again. We had one theater and growing up in Edmonton, Alberta, that would be the only one that would show that one movie. It wasn't like an art house, but it was that one theater that had like 18 screens. And they would just to fill those screens, they would put things like The Carpenter or Eddie and the Cruisers 2. And there was a little film that I would go see every week for, I would say, an entire summer because it was the only place that was there. And that was Michael Lehman's Heathers, played every week and was there for 20, 25, 26 weeks. And I would go back and watch Heathers, and I became obsessed with movies like Heathers. And that just expanded. My world just kind of exploded into this kind of genre driven world. And then I wanted more VHS tapes. And so I started trading with people like Chris Gore from Film Threat, who sold copies of Necromantic out of the back of Film Threat magazine. And I needed that. And then you'd bootleg copies and have two VHS tapes together, and you'd be trading for Fulci tapes and trying to sneak them into Canada and vice versa into the US. And then it was then you had Laserdisc, and now you had like, oh wow, it's a step above VHS.
Oh yeah.
And now you'd start buying your Laserdiscs, and then you bootleg VHS and Laserdisc. You'd make a booted you would advertise that you were making a copy off of Laserdisc, and like that was such a great improvement. And it just grew from there.
It grew from there to boutique to preserve and collect. That's where it grew to, and that's what we're talking about right now with the director, Ry Levey. And yeah, we all have. Mine was at a drive-in theater. They showed previews to 10,000 Maniacs, and it scared the crap out of me. And it was a double bill. I wish I could remember. It was something about zombies, but it was a double bill that ran, I think, all the time together. 10,000
Was it
Maniacs.
a drink? Maybe it was a Drink Your Blood. Drink Your Blood, or I Eat Your Skin played
Yeah,
that a lot.
yeah.
There's a lot of those Herschel Gordon Lewis
Oh
movies.
my God, did it
Oh,
scare the holy shit right out of me? And I had to see it. I mean, I don't even know if I saw it, I saw it like this with my hands up to my face the whole time. But that's another part of the story, which, by the way, I want to let people know that Boutique to Preserve and Collect is going to be screening around the country. Congratulations on the opening on July 30th at the Review Cinema in Toronto. Speaking of Canada, Ontario, and then it'll be at the Quad Cinema. Way to go on August 2nd. That's in New York. Sky Cinema Rail Yard in Santa Fe, New Mexico on the August 11th, 23rd of August, 20th through 23rd of August. Zeitgeist Theater,
Arabai, which is New
Araba.
Orleans, which is kind of like the suburb, just kind of in the different ward there. But it's basically the New Orleans market.
Very
So
good.
excited about that.
Keep going here on August 25th at the Proctor's Theater in Schenectady, New York, and also September 24th at the Guild Cinema in Albuquerque, New Mexico. What about Los Angeles? I don't see any dates.
We're working on LA right now. We're trying to figure out the right time. One of the things I'm doing with the tour is trying to be there for screenings, or
Okay.
also set up either coinciding screenings and events or pop-up stores. We wanted to make sure that, Boutique to Preserve and Collect is available on Blu-ray right now. We partnered with Enjoy the Ride Records, ETR Media, who are a partner label of the Vinegar Syndrome OCN distribution family. And so we want to drive people to, one, buy the Blu-ray of the film, but also start their own journey in collecting and archiving, because collecting is archiving. It's I there's a gentleman in our film who we met at one of their at the Vinegar Syndrome store in Bridgeport, Connecticut, who said it kind of makes you feel like a historian. And the truth is, this collecting is being a historian.
Yeah.
It's archiving. I look over to my left here, and there are, 4,000 books, and I know to the right of me there's about 2, 3,000 Blu-rays on my shelf. It's just When technology changes, as with celluloid, as with VHS, as with different formats, and they go away, we sometimes lose formats.
Yeah.
And this is where these labels have come in, is because they've had to be archivists to find the original source material. But if there ever comes a day and time where that source material is no longer existing, sometimes the only version of that film could possibly be that disc or that tape. And we hear stories of films disappearing, of them dissolving. And that, that's why we're kind of doing these screenings, but also we want to make sure that people have the access to see some of these films, not only on the big screen, but and this documentary there, but to also be able to purchase and own their own copies of this. So
Yeah.
that's where we're waiting on to see, so that I can be there, and potentially have some of the subjects in the films be there, maybe potentially do a screening of a film that's connected to the documentary that's featured in amongst the hundreds of clips that we feature in the film. And we're doing that in New Orleans. We're actually they've been very kind to give me a 4-day kind of run to do a couple of screenings of Boutique, but also incorporate titles that are not only featured in the documentary, but also an opportunity to promote the Blu-ray for my other film, Out in the Ring, since I want to help support, the label that we're with. And it just allows me to be part of the process, but also expand the process to encourage people to see other interesting pieces of work.
And it's very much in the spirit of the film. We see a number of the people who are running these distributors and who have a lifetime invested in collecting and archiving. We also see, just the fan base, the people who are in it because this is an obsession. Well, everyone in the film is there because they have a real passion for this. And so that was fun. By the way, I had David Gregory on probably a year ago to talk about his work on set with Severin. And I know there are a number of these distributors, by the way, for people who are interested in finding out more about this part of the cinematic world. Where would you send them? Would they come to your website for Boutique, or
I
was
mean,
that?
they can follow us at on our Instagram at RBLFDPR. And that is kind of the base camp for where I post things about my films that I either represent as a publicist or as a filmmaker or distribute. And that's kind of where we give that information out. And I kind of just focus mostly there. I do have a website, rylevey.com, that highlights, some of my work. It doesn't unfortunately get as updated as much as I'd like it to, just because I tend to keep myself so obscenely busy working on everybody else's films, trying to consistently make films. I'm always kind of keeping myself busy working on something. I probably need to use the word vacation, but I don't know if I'll ever be able to really have one. But
Yeah.
but it's kind of where I keep, where people can find out those information is, in those spaces there.
Well, you really are the Renaissance man when it comes to film. You have not only have you been, you're a filmmaker, you're a collector, you promote films through your work as a PR person. You spread the word about films. You do everything, I think, with your waking day to see that people have an opportunity to be exposed to all kinds of different films. And I think that's a true testament to this film. It feels like there's room in the bus for everybody. And whatever it may be that you're interested in the world of cinema, in the world of storytelling, really, that's what we're talking about. It's here. As someone who came a little bit later in life to my appreciation of films to the degree that I am now, I do appreciate anyone who's part of that tribe. And I want to send them to a website. How to your website for the film, or to just what you just said? Is that the best?
Yeah, you can go to rylevey.com, RYLEVEY.com, or you can go to our Instagram at RBLFDPR. PR. And those are the two places where I kind of, keep the things about what the work is that I'm doing, the films I'm releasing. And then, there are so many other great resources. I mean, obviously, the websites for so many of these companies are key. You mentioned my friend David Gregory, who's also in Boutique to Preserve and Collect. David himself is an incredibly fine filmmaker. When Boutique had its premiere at the Sitges Film Festival, which is the world's premier genre film festival, David was screening his doc on Susana, the Indonesian horror goddess. And so David was there. And so, he's just done such great work. And then, the team at Vinegar Syndrome is always doing such great work. And, their own label, is restoring things from the original negatives, the original source materials, cleaning up, piecing together the most obscure work and labels. There's nothing off limits with them. But then they've expanded it to include companies that these partner labels. And I think they're up to about 60 partner labels now. And like the company that represents my work, ETR Media, there are new companies coming every day. And there's a brilliant woman in Boutique, Sam Deegan, who is one of the foremost voices in extras and commentary on Blu-rays. And she, discusses in the film the idea of that we're only scratching the surface on cinema. Recent discovery is that there have been films like The Devils that have gone missing and are now going to get a release.
Yeah.
The Devils has been restored.
That was Ken Russell's film way back.
Yes.
Thank you. I continue to fight the good fight. I came to all of this insanity as a projectionist in an art house. My education has been mostly cinema paradiso. That's really how in terms of understanding film, I watched it. And again, like I said, I was in my mid-20s by the time that happened. But I appreciate what you do, Ry, and continue to do, and all the people you mentioned and that we see in the film Boutique to Preserve and Collect. My congratulations to you on the film. Congratulations on the opening in Toronto, Ontario, Review Cinema on the 30th, and there will be a list of all the different places: the Quad Cinema in New York, Sky Cinema in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Zeitgeist in Aribe. No, am I saying
Arabi,
Arabi, Louisiana, Proctor Theater in Schenectady, New York, Guild Cinema in Albuquerque, New Mexico. All of it will be there. It'll be looking for Boutique to Preserve and Collect, and we'll be looking for an LA date soon as well. So thank you, Ry.
Thank you so much.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.